The incessant drumming of rain against the window pane was a soundtrack to my unease. It was late, well past midnight, and the storm outside seemed to mirror the turmoil within me. I was 29, a solitary figure in a world that often felt too crowded. Camping, true wilderness camping, was my sanctuary, a place where the static of everyday life faded, and I could finally hear my own thoughts. But tonight, even the wild offered no solace. My recent breakup had left me raw and exposed, a wound that refused to heal. I had packed my truck on impulse, driven by a primal need for solitude, for the quiet embrace of nature. My destination, a secluded bend in a remote river, a place I had discovered years ago, untouched by the footprints of others. Or so I thought. The moment I turned onto the barely there dirt road, a knot tightened in my stomach. Two trucks, a gray and a white, were already parked near the trailhead. My heart sank. This was not the desolate escape I craved. I sat for a moment, the engine idling, torn between turning back and pushing on. It is a big stretch of river, I reasoned. Chances are they are camped far enough away. I convinced myself, a fragile hope against the rising tide of disappointment. I hiked for about 15 minutes downriver, the mud sucking at my boots with each step ahead through the misty rain. I spotted them. Two men fishing. They fit the stereotype, thick beards, a little overweight, heavy boots, but it wasn't their appearance that caught my attention. As I drew closer, one of them quickly draped his jacket over something, a hurried, almost furtive movement. He offered an awkward, lopsided smile and called out, "Just target shooting, cans. Didn't mean to freak you out." I gave a polite nod, my pace unwavering. His words, though seemingly innocuous, gnawed at me. The rushed, overly casual tone, the way he had tried too hard to sound normal, it all felt off. A familiar unease settled in, that prickling sensation when something does not quite add up. I tried to dismiss it, to attribute it to the quirks of rural life. People out here were not always known for their social graces. I pushed the feeling down, focusing instead on finding my own patch of wilderness. A little further down the bend, I found a spot where the trees grew denser and the trail dipped out of sight. It wasn't perfect, but it offered enough seclusion to feel like my own space. I set up my tent, pulled out a book, and tried to lose myself in its pages. I shouted back. I thought it was a phone. Anisha. The rain began to fall lightly. A soft patter against the tent fabric. I pulled on my rain jacket, letting the gentle rhythm. Hurried back to my campsite. The feeling of vulnerability, a cold, tight knot in my stomach. I crawled into my tent, the nylon fabric offering little comfort against the encroaching dread. Sleep was an elusive concept. My mind replayed the breakup, every word, every mistake, every what if. Echoing in the silence, the rhythmic patter of rain against the tent, usually a lullaby, now felt like a taunting drumbeat. Then a new sound began to filter through the rain. Faint, uneven sounds, like someone stepping carefully over wet ground. At first I tried to rationalize it, the rain, an animal. But the longer I listened, the clearer it became. Footsteps circling my campsite. The realization hit me like a physical blow, and my stomach plummeted. There was no doubt in my mind who it was. I was no fool. I never ventured into the wilderness unarmed. My handgun tucked securely beside my sleeping bag was my only comfort. I grabbed it, the cold metal a reassuring weight in my palm. Then with a surge of adrenaline I unzipped the tent and stepped out into the rain. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. I clicked on my flashlight, the beam cutting through the rain, streaked darkness sweeping across the trees. And there he was, the man from the river, half hidden behind a thick oak, his face a chillingly blank mask. No smile, no scowl, just an unnerving emptiness. But it wasn't his vacant expression that made my blood run cold. It was the small axe clutched in his left hand. For a terrifying second, I was frozen, every muscle locked. All I could think about was the vast emptiness around me, the miles of wilderness separating me from any semblance of help. Nobody would hear me scream, but somehow, through the haze of fear, I managed to raise the gun, leveling it at him. My voice, though trembling, emerged with a surprising firmness. "Leave now, or I will kill you." His expression remained unchanged, my words seemingly meaningless to him. After a few agonizing seconds of silence, he mumbled something, his voice thick and slurred. "My friend Ivan discouraged me from coming to find you. I had to take care of Ivan." I didn't wait for him to finish the words. Nonsensical and chilling, solidified my resolve. I fired a shot, the deafening crack echoing through the trees, a beacon of defiance. The bullet ripped into the branches above his head, showering us both with leaves and bark. He stumbled, clearly startled. I re-leveled the gun, a newfound confidence surging through me. "Last chance," I bit out. "Drop the axe." He complied, the axe clattering to the wet ground. A wave of immense relief washed over me, but I knew I wasn't out of danger yet. I ordered him to take off his shoes, a desperate attempt to slow him down. If he tried to follow, then I made him empty his pockets, ensuring he had no other weapons. Once I was certain he was unarmed, I told him to go to my tent and grab my gear. I watched him like a hawk as he fumbled with my backpack, forcing him to toss everything out into the open where I could see it. I packed the essentials with trembling hands, never taking my eyes off him. The axe, a morbid trophy, I jammed into my own backpack. I had to abandon the tent, but that was a small price to pay for my life. I grabbed his discarded shoes and hurled them as far as I could into the inky blackness of the forest. "Walk in the opposite direction," I commanded, my voice strained. I kept the flashlight beam fixed on him as he stumbled away, a pathetic, shoeless figure disappearing into the storm. The moment he was out of sight, I turned and started hiking back up the river as fast as my legs could carry me. That was the true terror, stumbling through the pitch-black forest in the driving rain, the potential for a deranged killer lurking behind every tree. I wasn't sure if he was following, but I couldn't afford to stop and find out. I used the flashlight sparingly, just enough to navigate the treacherous terrain. Every shadow, a potential threat. Both pickup trucks were still in the pullout when I finally reached my own vehicle. I didn't hesitate. I threw my gear into the truck and sped out of there, the tires spitting gravel as I left the nightmare behind. When I finally found cell service, I called the police, describing my location as best I could. Months have passed since that night. I never heard if anything came of the investigation, and I haven't gone out of my way to find out. But the man's chilling comment still echoes in my mind. My friend Ivan discouraged me from coming to find you. I had to take care of Ivan. I don't want to dwell on what that means, but the implications are clear and terrifying. I am just grateful I was armed that rainy night. I could have easily been my last. The rain was a relentless force against the house, each drop a tiny hammer blow against the windows. It was a Saturday night in May, late, well past midnight, and the insistent drumming on the roof had shattered any hope of sleep. I was 15, and unlike most people, the sound of rain did not lull me to sleep. In fact, it did the exact opposite. I have a peculiar set of medical conditions that make life a constant tightrope walk. Frequent panic attacks, a tendency to faint without warning, and at times a struggle to breathe. And then there is the sleep issue. Complete and utter silence is my only path to slumber. Even the hum of a small fan is enough to keep me wide awake. I tossed and turned, the sound of the downpour a cruel mockery of rest. Finally I surrendered. Sleep was not coming tonight. I slipped out of bed, the silence of my room a welcome contrast to the storm outside. I needed to expend some energy to tire myself out. A walk in the rain. It was a habit my parents encouraged when insomnia struck. We lived in a safe residential area, bordering a large, well-lit public park. It was an unconventional solution, but it usually worked. I pulled on a rain jacket, quietly descended the stairs, and stepped out into the night, leaving my phone behind. I knew myself well enough. A screen would only exacerbate my wakefulness. The air was surprisingly peaceful, a stark contrast to the chaos of my mind. The trees, their branches heavy with rain, swayed gently in the wind, a silent, majestic dance. For about 20 minutes I walked, the cool rain a balm against my skin, until finally a pleasant fatigue began to set in. I turned back towards home, confident that sleep would embrace me the moment I touched my bed. As I cut through the park, my gaze drifted towards the road. Something long and black lay flat in the middle of the street. At first I dismissed it as an oddly shaped garbage bag, but as I drew closer, the horrifying truth began to dawn on me. It was a person, lying face down in the middle of the road. A sickening wave of dread washed over me. The only logical explanation was that they had been hit by a car, injured, or worse. Every instinct screamed at me to turn away, to run, but my parents had instilled in me a deep sense of responsibility. If I saw someone in need, I helped. So against the screaming protests of my gut, I began to approach the figure.
As I neared the road, I could make out their clothing. Black pants and a dark plaid shirt. Definitely not what someone would wear in a downpour. Judging by the attire, it was a man, though I had already assumed as much. Whether it was the gravity of the situation or something else entirely, I suddenly felt an intense, bone-deep cold. It was as if the lukewarm rain had instantly transformed into ice. Just as I reached the edge of the road, a blood-curdling screech ripped through the air from somewhere behind me. Instinct took over. I whipped my head around, adrenaline flooding my veins. It was a howl, but not quite like a wounded animal, a sound I had never heard before. My eyes scanned the tree line, but there was nothing. The sound must have come from deeper within the park, meaning no immediate danger. Still, the sheer strangeness of it all, the lack of an explanation, sent a shiver of pure terror through me. But that terror was about to multiply 1,000-fold, because when I turned back towards the street, the person was no longer lying down. They were sitting perfectly upright, staring directly at me. In that moment, my vision blurred, the world narrowing to a single, terrifying point. The muffled patter of 1,000 raindrops was the only thing that kept me from collapsing right there. Before I could react, the figure stood up, and then, with a demonic grin stretched across their face, they started sprinting towards me. In their hand, glinting wetly in the dim light, was what looked like a kitchen knife. Until that moment, I had not truly understood what it meant to fear for your life. The haze broke. I turned and ran as fast as my legs could carry me in the opposite direction. "I will kill you!" His voice ripped through the rain, chilling me to the bone. The wet grass made running at full speed impossible, but it was my only saving grace. He would face the same impediment. I would not lead him to my house. I veered towards the trees, hoping to lose him in the park's dense foliage. I knew the screech had come from there, but I had no other choice. I did not look back, I just ran, fueled by a primal terror. Considering how crazed he looked, I knew my life depended on it. I pushed deeper into the woods, aiming for the densest part, hoping to find a hiding place before he caught up. I did not even know if he was still chasing me, but I could not stop. Part of me felt that if I stopped running, the fear would overwhelm me and I would faint. I finally made it into the thicket, my lungs burning on the verge of throwing up from exhaustion. I ducked behind a large tree, gasping for breath. I looked behind me. Nothing, or at least nothing I could see. The only thought in my mind was how I was going to get home safely. I did not feel comfortable moving, so I stayed there, hidden, listening. I must have waited at least 20 minutes before I finally dared to step out from behind the tree. I took the longest way home, circling around the back side of the park, through a less familiar section that eventually spit me out a few streets away from my house. No one followed. I finally made it home, collapsing onto my bed, drenched and traumatized. I never got any answers about what happened that night. The howl in particular still mystifies me. I find it hard to believe it was related to the man who attacked me, but the coincidence is too stark to ignore. Perhaps he heard it too, looked up, saw me, and then, for whatever twisted reason, decided to attack. As for his motivation, I have no idea. There are just crazy people out there. Maybe he was on drugs. It is not a real explanation, but it is the only one I have. I still live in the same house. Years have passed, but the memory of that rainy night, the cold, the fear, and the unhinged man resurfaces every so often. It is a stark reminder of the fragile line between safety and terror, even in the most familiar of places.
The storm raged outside, a furious symphony of wind and rain. I was only in second or third grade then, small and insignificant in the face of such raw power. My parents had picked me up from school the day, already a blurred memory of dreary classrooms and the persistent drumming of rain. They were due to attend some upscale event, a fundraiser, a dinner party. The details are lost to the mists of time. They were supposed to return that night, but the storm, with its escalating ferocity, made the drive home unsafe. Reluctantly, they decided to stay at a friend's house, much closer to the event. I remember the call on the old house phone, their voices filled with apologies, repeatedly expressing regret for leaving me alone. I insisted I was fine, even excited. Unlimited candy, no bedtime, a child's dream. My mom, ever cautious, gave me a list of instructions. Lock all the doors and windows, keep at least one light on, close all the blinds. Typical parental precautions. At the time, I didn't grasp the gravity of being left alone. I was too young to understand the dangers. My room, devoid of any screens, offered no entertainment, so I settled into the living room, sprawled on the couch, watching TV. I promised myself I'd complete my mother's list before bed, planning to stay up all night. But the sugar crash, inevitable after a candy binge, claimed me. I drifted off to sleep. The TV's drone, a distant hum. I don't recall the exact hour I woke, but it was late enough for the TV to have entered sleep mode, indicating at least 3 hours had passed. The first thing I noticed was the cold. It wasn't just the natural drop in temperature at night. It was a significant chill, enough to instantly register, even in my young mind. I considered curling back up, surrendering to sleep's embrace. But then, my mother's list. A phantom weight on my conscience pulled me from the couch. I didn't want to disappoint her, especially after she had trusted me, so I forced myself, up a weary soldier on a mission. I checked every door and window, ensuring they were locked. The blinds were drawn, the designated light left on. Everything, as far as I could tell, was shut tight, yet the house remained unnervingly cold. I pressed my hand against a couple of windows, checking for cracks, but they were sealed. Perhaps the storm had knocked out the heater, I reasoned, a plausible explanation for my tired brain. I didn't dwell on it. Too exhausted to expend more energy on the anomaly, I headed upstairs, eager for the warmth of my bed. It was only when I reached my bedroom that the true intensity of the storm became apparent. The living room, tucked away in the center of the house, had buffered me from its full force. My childhood bedroom, however, boasted a large external window, and through it the storm screamed. Rain slammed against the glass. A furious assault. Every minute or so, a blinding flash of lightning illuminated the room, followed by a deafening crash of thunder that vibrated through the floorboards. I wasn't scared of storms, but a small fear of a falling tree began to stir within me. It was probably why sleep, despite my earlier exhaustion, refused to come. As I lay there, trying to lull myself back to sleep, I started hearing odd sounds. Faint, uneven, creaks like shifting wood. The entire floor was carpeted, so it couldn't be from my room. At first I attributed it to the wind, the groaning of old timbers. But the sound didn't quite fit. Even then I knew the characteristic sounds of a thunderstorm. This was different. This was something else. It started to bother me. This persistent, inexplicable creaking. It wasn't the storm keeping me awake, it was that stupid sound. I couldn't take it any longer. I sat up, peering into the darkness, not really sure what I was looking for. I strained my ears, trying to filter out the noise of the storm and isolate the creaking. Lightning flashed momentarily, bathing the room in stark electric light. Everything looked normal, but my eyes were drawn to the only wooden object in the room, my closet. The room plunged back into darkness. I sat there, perfectly still, my breath held. About a minute later, lightning flashed again, illuminating my room for a split second, and in that split second, I saw something that made me choke. The closet door was slightly ajar. It had been closed, I was absolutely certain of it. Something had opened it. There was something in my room. I didn't scream. I didn't speak. My mind was a blank slate of pure terror. I simply slid out of bed as quietly as I could, my movements slow, deliberate, as if any sudden motion would shatter the fragile illusion of safety. That walk from my bed to the door felt like an impossibly long journey, a 500-mile odyssey that stretched into an eternity. I reached the door, slipped out and descended the stairs in a silent, panicked fog.
The end. The story has now come to an end. If you enjoyed it and want to hear more thrilling and interesting horror stories, then don't forget to subscribe, like, and share my channel. Thank you for watching my video.